And welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Bench with Bubba, episode 61. You can find me on Twitter at BDentric. And this week, joined by a special guest, a first-timer. You can find him at big3sports.com. He's on Twitter at Lance Brozdow. Lance Brozdowski, how we doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on. I'm pretty excited. I usually don't get the casting call for stuff like this too much, so I'm amped to talk with you and chat. We got a nice little list of notes here, so I'm excited, man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. I'm pumped to have you. I love just talking baseball, if it's fantasy, real life, whatever.
Yeah.
Started following you a while back. You got great content, so I've had you on the list of people to invite. And we'll get right into it. After you went to Winter Meetings last week, I'm first extremely jealous as a baseball nut myself. Like, that's on the list of things to do. What was like some of the highlights, man? It's got to be a rush.
Yeah, it was like, I gotta say, like, going in, I didn't know like what my expectations were. From what I understood from a lot of the people in the industry, they told me that it's basically a job-seeking fest. So everyone goes down there who's a student, from college, you're trying to get a major league ops job or whatever, and you go down in like your blazer and your tie and stuff like that, and everyone looks the same. It's like a horde of students. But so I kind of was expecting the worst, I have to say, actually. But I got down there, and I was actually down there representing the Collegiate Baseball Scouting Network, which I'm the editor for. And we were trying to pick up scouts. So I met the management team from them. So it was a kind of weird blend of like me meeting a lot of people for the first time. So I connected with them. And then, when we were actually at the hotel, it was at the Dolphin and Swan in Orlando. It was awesome. Like, I don't even know what to say more than that. There's just so many people there that I just love talking baseball, as you just said. I just love bantering about baseball and talking about it. That it was one of those things, everywhere you turn, you see someone you either recognize from MLB Network or something like that, or if you know the beat reporter face or a face of a beat reporter, like Ken Rosenthal is pretty hard to miss. He's kind of short guy, but he's the man. I liked him. I shook his hand. I was very proud of that. But there's a highlight. You said highlights. I think that was a highlight, shaking his hand. I wish I actually reached out to him on Twitter, and I was like, hey, I'd love to sit down with you and just do like an expose on you as a person and your development in the athletic and stuff like that. And he respectfully declined, but the fact that he reached out to me on Twitter, I was like starstruck. I was like, man, I'm just gonna reach out to you for random stuff now and just decline me, and I'm just gonna be happy for the rest of the day. But yeah, I mean, highlights. Yeah, was that was running into everyone, was drinking at the bars. Like, the big thing at night is going there and just kind of connecting with people. And I feel like people definitely open up more when you give them a couple beers, which is ideal, as I'm sure anyone who's been in any work environment knows. Just give a couple of beers to someone, and the truth serum helps out. But I think that the biggest highlight, if you're talking like the content, I write a ton and I do a lot of coverage and stuff like that. And the biggest thing for me was Jim Callis, actually. So I saw him. Is anyone that knows the Swan Resort or whatever has been down there, they have like this cafe called Fuel, which I spent an absurd amount of money at every morning, buying a water and like a pastry just to hold myself over. It was like $18. I got like a water, a pastry, and like a granola bar, and I was just like mind blown. It's like $18. Oh my god, I could buy like 2 Chipotle burritos or something. But I saw Jim Callis standing in the corner, and I recognized him. He's got very distinct glasses, and I just actually this summer was out in Fort Wayne, Indiana, watching the Padres A-ball team, and Tatis Jr. was there. And I really wanted his perspective on him because I know he's been a riser on a lot of lists. And I got a good look at him. Got a good look at a couple of the other guys too. But I was like, you know what? There's very few times where I'm going to get a chance to talk to Cal. So I waited for him to finish. And then we started chatting for about like 10, 15 minutes, actually extended longer than I wanted. And then at the end, I was like, hey, I want to sit down with you and like really dig in. So we sat down for about 30 minutes the next day, coordinated. I was very happy that he wasn't super busy to kind of cut me out of his list of priorities. And did a really cool comment. I pretty much just transcribed it, but the talk itself was probably the highlight. We dug into some 2018 draft guys, dug into his concept around two-way players and how he thinks that development's going to go from the college level to the minors to the majors. And yeah, that's the thing that sticks with me the most, I would say. It's definitely that Callis interview.
Yeah, that's awesome. The closest I've come to something like that, and I prefer to do it in baseball, but when the Super Bowl came to San Francisco, I went to the media day because anybody can get a credential to that. And so I'm walking around and I'm interviewing the players and I'm talking like Ian Rappaport standing there and all kinds of guys. So I get what you're saying. It's kind of a different animal, but I would love to meet Jim Callis. I'm a big prospect guy as well. I think that's kind of how I started following you and getting to know who you were is stuff along that lines. And picking his brain would be a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely.
Fun. What would you do differently this year or next time around? I know it's in Vegas next year, and that's just going to be a complete circus. I can only imagine what's going to take place. Like, why would you have an event in Vegas?
Oh, it's such a terrible idea. I
What
know.
would you do differently?
I think actually, you're just talking about getting credentialed. The thing I would do differently is I would make sure I'm credentialed if I go back, because I wasn't credentialed, but I was walking around the media floor, and I feel like I'm tall. I'm very tall, and I look a little bit not like a college student, kind of like if you see me in person. I know, look, I kind of got a baby face. I look young, whatever. But, if you see me walking around, I had like a blazer on, and I feel like to some extent people didn't know that I wasn't credentialed, which was good because I was able to just stand there the whole time and just watch like Chris Russo yell and stuff like that. They had the high heat set was like right there as in the media floor, but they kicked some other people out. But I would go down, I would make sure I was credentialed, because I would have loved to have sit in on that Giancarlo press conference, which was right there. There's a couple other GM things that I wasn't able to get access to. And I also just feel like it would have been much easier to build conversations and my own credibility. It's kind of hard pitching to people, that I'm trying to do this for a living. It's like, oh, I'm right for Big 3 Sports, right for Razzball, right for these other sites. And it's like, I hope that one of them clicks. Like, there's a small chance that they know what Big 3 Sports is. A little bit bigger of a chance they know what Razzball is. I'm trying to get my name out elsewhere, so it's like I just gotta drop something that they know. And sometimes I'll just go to, like, I post on Fangraphs community forums a lot, and they're like, "Oh, Fangraphs, yeah, you write for Fangraphs." I was like, "No, I don't write for Fangraphs. Post to the community side of it." So, but yeah, I'd get credentialed, build the credibility a little bit more, and just kind of be able to sit in on some of that stuff would have been sick. I think that's the biggest thing, and probably a little bit more. Like, I'm relatively social in settings like this. I know. I mean, I can't imagine if you're introverted going down there, because I'm sure there's a lot of ways you can just kind of hang in the corner, but really just like talking to people more. Like, by the third day, I really got into a groove with just like connecting with whoever and just pitching what I wanted to do and what our company story was on the Collegiate Baseball Scouting Network side, and just what I want to do as a person, in the industry. But yeah, maybe earlier on, I would say too, just being a little more social. Like, if I saw someone, you run into them. Like, the other thing too, like, I enjoy talking to I ran into some scouts, like area scouts for teams, and I really, like, everyone I ran into, I had a question just in my head just pop up. Like, ran to an Astros when I was like Kyle Tucker meeting. I want to know about his development and stuff like that. So that was the biggest thing. Like, I wish that I just talked to more people, because you never know, like, someone you're sitting next to is a scout, whether he's on the media side, whether he has nothing to do with baseball and is just there with their family down in Disney World for some reason, which I'm so sorry if anyone's down there and saw the baseball nerds running around talking baseball and trying to push their kids through Disney World. But yeah, credentials is probably the biggest thing. As far as advice goes, though, I mean, I'd go back to being social. Just really be social and connect with people.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is you nailed it there. I know it's hard for some, like you said, introverted and everything. You can't be shy. Between the NFL experience I had, I've done PGA at Pebble before for the Pro-Am and everything. You can't be scared to talk to these people. Like, you just can't. And I know it's tough, but once you get the first few rolling, like you said, you get comfortable. And a lot of these guys, and I've even told it to people on Twitter and, just getting different people on podcasts and stuff, you never know until you try, and you'll be shocked at how many people just want to talk sports and stuff.
Oh, exactly.
You'll be shocked.
The industry is so friendly. I don't think I've ever met someone in person who has been not what I expected as far as like how nice they are and stuff, Like, Fangraphs had a meet up in Boston, and like all the writers were there and stuff, and I was starstruck, but each of them was like genuinely interesting to talk to, and I was blown away. It was awesome.
Because the best part is they're just like me and you. They all started from the bottom, and it's like in the end of it, I know I've said it many times, they just want to sit and talk sports. They don't care about who you are or what you do. Like, it's fun.
Yep.
So
yeah, exactly, man.
All about it. Recently, you came out with an article on Big 3 Sports about some of the interactions you've made with Eno Saris and other people in the media force about the Athletic. It's a great website. I highly advise people to subscribe to it. I've mentioned it on every podcast I do. I think it's phenomenal. The platform, everything is great. What was your total take on this and like the direction it's going?
Yeah, this was one of the bigger like reporting pieces I'd done. It took me about 2 months to get everything together, so it was the biggest time investment I've ever had in something like this. And I refined how the prose was in my speech and just kind of what I was talking about. We'll look it over. It's a work sample of mine that I really wanted to hammer, but I initially came into it wanting to be a little bit more diverse, and then I realized all the connections I had were more baseball based. So the comma as a whole is just about the Athletic. So anyone that doesn't know, the Athletic is basically a paywall subscription sports blog is what it is. And that's one of the main features of it. And the other main feature is that it's what I consider called hyper local. So they have Chicago, San Francisco, Toronto, all these kind of areas and they have sub sites. And if you buy an athletic subscription, you get all those sub sites. And what they started to do is, with a lot of the layoffs that went on, they were able to pick up some of the national writers. So they started to kind of build this interesting national blend on top of these sub sites, these hyper local sites. So as a whole, there hasn't been too much growth of late. Like, I noticed they've been picking up smaller writers, but there was a huge influx of growth in late August, I believe it was, where they grabbed Rosenthal, Stuart Mandel, and a couple other people who were just big in the college sports side, and really just built this brand that is started to take over. But, you know, my interest around it, wanting to get into sports media, is it going to be successful? This is the ultimate question: is, do we think this is going to succeed and this is going to become the model of sports? We're so used to free content as a whole, you know, in the sports specifically, that I think it's going to be very hard. One of the things I mentioned in the column is just habit. Habit is very hard to change as a whole for people, especially people who are a little bit older. Like, no offense to anyone that's older listening, but I mean, I think I'm getting a little more stubborn as I age, but it's one of those things, like, it's just tough to tell someone who's picked up a paper from the Globe, Boston Globe, out in Boston. So the Globe comes to mind, or just anywhere, goes to SB Nation and sees all that free content that's very good, and then tell them, you know, this is equally as good content, if not better. I think it is substantially better. That's just my personal opinion. But to pay for it is the thing, and to get people over that hump is the thing, and to grow the subscriber base is the other thing, because at the end of the day, they have a lot of backing on the investment side. I think they have over like $5 million in investment. And that's why they were able to pay all these writers pretty well. So if you're looking at it from the sports media side, you're coming in as a writer like myself, I'm trying to break in the model I want, because that's stable income. Like, if we have a subscriber base that's paying $7 a month, or whatever it averages out to, mainly they do like 6-month, 1-year plans. If we have people paying that, and we know how many people are paying that, and it's a year, that's stable revenue and it's stable income for the writers, as opposed to a cost per click system, which we've seen take off with the .com boom and stuff like that. It's all like ads, Google AdSense, AdWords, and all that stuff. It's different, and that's the thing. It's just, as a whole, the Athletic is that it's hyper local, and it's the paywall, and it's bringing it back. And, you know, as you're saying, I spoke to Eno Saris of Fangraphs and the Athletic. Spoke to Edward Egros, who I actually met out in Boston from the Douse, Fort Worth area. He does Fox Sports. He's on air. Talked to Sean Lehman, who's actually the founder of the Lehman database, for anyone that's on the stat side and has ever delved into R. And I talked to Mike Reese, actually, who's a very big Patriots reporter that I swindled my way into a connection of. But I mean, as a whole, I think if you want to encompass everything that they had to say about it, it's hope. They're hopeful that it will work, because it will create stable jobs for the sports media industry and writers who are trying to break in. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I bet you read some of the column, but if you had any questions on it, you know, I'd love to go into more depth. It's just tough, because it's one of those things where I had so many thoughts. Like, I could go on for an hour about this, and just, I'm sure people would immediately tune out of the podcast, though.
No. That's what I love about this. This is one of the ones that's my podcast. So literally, I've done movies, TV shows, food, sports, whatever. It's what we want to talk about. So I was really intrigued by it, because I've been doing my website, These Sports Degens, for about 2 years now. I know you have your website, and we can probably relate a bit that it's hard to find the advertising, the funds, all that stuff to make it work. And you detailed that in the column, and I found that very interesting, that even these guys with the backing, and you know, they probably have stuff like ESPN has, where they can go and get advertisement that can pay big bucks. They can probably figure that out. But they're going with the subscription philosophy, which I love. Do you think that's going to actually be successful? Like, you personally, do you think that's successful? Because I think the content's great. You think the content's great. But the average Joe, will they find it great enough to continually subscribe to it?
It's interesting. I think those are kind of two different questions, actually. I think that if the average Joe finds it's successful and appreciates it, I think they will pay. But as a whole, will it be successful? I think that's kind of a twofold question. I will say, personally, trying to remove as much of my bias as possible, yes, it will be successful. But the qualifier there is that I think there's a way to do it that makes it more efficient in the long run, and that's where they're going to have to go. And that is, in my opinion, means they're going to have to cut out, I think, some of the smaller subsites that aren't doing as well. Because I know a lot of their information isn't public. They don't even let out subscriber numbers or anything like that, or revenue or anything. So we really are in the dark with a lot of what's going on. We can maybe average it out based on some of the other local ones, but that's kind of a crude thing, and I'm sure that there's much more accurate, and they're the biggest doing this in the country, I believe. So I think that what we're going to see is, like, Chicago has been very successful. Toronto and their hockey side has been extremely, extremely successful. I think that what we'll see over the next year or so is concentration on those smaller subsites that are doing very well, and then kind of maybe getting away from the ones that aren't doing as well and knocking off some of the stuff. Like, I know they have a lot of A's coverage, but I don't know. Like, you're on the West Coast, so it's like, do people really want to read about the A's? Like, I know winning can make any fan base kind of come back to life, but the A's haven't kind of won for a while, and that's one of the things. Like, if they're putting a lot of money into the A's and no one's reading that, from a business standpoint, if I'm coming in and I'm looking at that, I'm going, well, you guys are killing it in Chicago. We really like your hockey content in Toronto, but the A's content, view-wise, is just such a small percentage. Like, if we can cut costs on that and only lose this amount on the view side, maybe lose a couple of subscribers that really wanted that A's coverage, is that more efficient in the long run for us? And I think that's what it's going to consolidate to. I think that a lot of people who look at their site right now see all these cities, and the couple that stand out immediately is not being there in New York, Boston, and LA. Yeah. And you go, oh my God, they're going to go there next. But the big thing is, do you think they'll be successful there? This is something I actually wanted to ask you, is do you think they'll be successful there? My initial impression is that it's going to be very hard because the costs are going to be higher. And there's a lot more competition, like there's a lot of competition.
Yeah, the competition's tremendous because those obviously major markets, they have so many people there doing work. And like a market like LA that I'm familiar with when I visited, I don't live there, but they're not really a single team fandom. It's kind of like a conglomerate of people. So like if they're just there covering, say, the Rams and the Chargers, do enough people in that area care about it? And I think that's kind of what you're getting at there. And that's a tough one. Like New York, I could see being there. There's so many loyalists to teams, but then again, like you said, it's compacted. Yeah, that's interesting because that was going to lead me to a question for you is, do you think, because I agree with what you're saying, is maybe cut out this or that, do they maybe go to a different philosophy where it's you subscribe for a certain sport or just a certain city and go from there instead of doing this total package thing? Or are they going to – it doesn't sound like you think they're going to keep adding more small towns because that seems like it's not going to work. But the way they came out, all of a sudden they're adding Pittsburgh and towns I didn't think would be high on the list, but they're doing that. And, like, could Denver be one with the Rockies and the Nuggets and the Broncos, stuff like that?
Yeah, that's tough. It's like, as a whole, you look at it and, there's the funny thing with Pittsburgh, actually, specifically, you bring that up. There's another site called DK Sports, which is basically the equal of The Athletic. And I believe The Athletic at some point actually came to, I think his name's Dejan Kovacevic, and I'm hoping I get that right there. But DK Sports Pittsburgh is like basically an offshoot. It's essentially The Athletic's model, but it's not The Athletic. It's this guy's own vision, and he came up with it. And he actually sold the infrastructure to a guy out in Boston, Eric Bedard, for the Boston Sports Journal, which is another one that's like identical. It's literally a subscription-based sports blog specific to that area. So it's interesting to me that they went to Pittsburgh and that they have some of that stuff. They're going to branch out there and stuff. But, I mean, I don't think that they're going to pick up a lot of the small towns unless they think they can do it cost effectively and the viewership is there. Denver's an interesting one. I haven't really been out to Denver in my life, actually. I haven't been out west too much, but I know that fan base is relatively passionate, and you have 4 sports teams there, even if the Avalanche aren't the most competitive team. They have McKinnon and some other guys that are interesting, but that's an interesting one. I think that there's certain markets that would be interesting for them to expand to, but from a business side, they really got to drill in on that and figure out what's most cost effective to do. As far as them turning to a pay for area model, I would say strongly that they won't do that. I think that one of the biggest selling points for them is that it's a very intuitive platform. Like, it's actually confusing. The question I'm sure they get all the time is like, oh, if I pay this amount of money, do I get access to all the things? And what they can easily say back is, you pay this fee, you have everything we write. And I think that if they break that up, that's not good for the marketing side of it. I know they don't do a ton of marketing, but from the marketing side of it, like if you're a writer and you want someone to subscribe to The Athletic, it's so much easier to just be like, pay X amount of dollars for 6 months, pay $35 for 6 months, you get everything we have. And we just break it out by sport and by town. So I don't think that they'll go to, even like a scaled model, which is, I think, what you're kind of implying here is that maybe they go to a scaled model, like pay a little bit more and you get Chicago, pay a little bit less, we'll give you Toronto and stuff like that. It's interesting, but I think it really messes with their brand a bit, which I wrote about kind of in the piece is something that's very cohesive. And I think they really want to keep that together.
And then that goes back to one of your initial statements. That'll mess up the constant flow of cash that you can pay your writers. Because if, X amount's going over here, well, how do I afford the guys over here type thing? So
exactly.
that makes
at that point, you'd start to see a lot of people cut off. And it's one of those things, like, it's a bit not to bring in like politics or anything, but it's a bit socialist to some extent, where you have a lot of different writers, like the Chicago writers are probably to some extent supporting the base, getting more views in some of the other areas. But all those writers that I've communicated with, I've contacted Eno, I've contacted a couple others. Shahadev Sharma actually is a really, really good guy from the Chicago area, great writer. They buy into it as a whole, like Eno said that too. He's just really like, they like the model a lot. They like what's going on. And because of that, I think they're okay with the fact that maybe some areas are booing the others. So yeah, that's one of those things. Like if you scale the pay, that's just, I think, going to mess up and create probably a little bit more harm than good.
True. And right now you say maybe this region supporting this region, but then you already said earlier, maybe all of a sudden, the Pirates make a run and they start winning a little bit, then that area could boom. And next thing you know, the Giants get even worse and no one wants to read about that anymore. So it could change everything. You mentioned Boston and Pittsburgh's got their little setup. I just saw Dallas is starting their own website like that. What makes me curious, because I wouldn't be shocked if other regions start this. Maybe the Athletic does the whole, okay, we're going to watch from afar, see how it does, and then come in and buy them.
It's interesting too. I mean, I listen to, so one of my favorite podcasts actually is the SI Media podcast with Richard Deitch, I think his name is. He does a lot of deep dives into the sports media side, and in the past they've had the episodes about the Athletic. And I think the Athletic came to DK in Pittsburgh and asked if they wanted to like partner somehow, and DK said no because he liked the model. And I mean, on the smaller scale, like the microeconomic scale of what DK was doing, from what I understand, was very, very profitable, what he was doing. But the flip side of that is that the Athletic, with all their startup costs and everything they've gone through, I don't think that they have more than one or two profitable areas. Like if you're looking on an area scale, I think Toronto's profitable. And from my understanding, I do not confirm this or quote me on this, but I believe that Toronto's one of the only ones that is profitable. All the others are breaking even or in the negatives. And that's because of the crazy startup costs and stuff like that to get this going. But I mean, that's interesting. Dallas is starting up. I'm actually might connect with one of the individuals I spoke with for the column who is out in Dallas, because I think I actually asked him if it would work, and he said he wasn't sure, and he was kind of hesitant to commit to yes or no on it. But that's interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested to see if they kind of go with the acquisition side, acquisition to growth, as opposed to doing the growth themselves. I guess like having the capital to put in X amount of dollars to get more cities going. So yeah, it's just,
I was just trying to look it up.
What their intentions are.
You can't just put out a flyer. You can't really figure it out. I know what they're trying to provide great coverage of stuff, but it's tough when, like, another point you made at the beginning is everyone can find free content. It's just a matter of what content do you want.
Exactly.
I forget his name now. It's the EFIS pitch guy out of Texas. If you go check out his Twitter, he talks about the new Dallas setup. It's pretty interesting. But we'll move on from here. We might have to come back and revisit this topic because I'm intrigued by it, and you have a lot of good takes on this. So we might have to come back to that at another date.
Absolutely.
But let's get into some MLB offseason talk. And I put out a Twitter poll yesterday just for fun. Who had the bigger mess of an offseason so far, the Marlins or the Orioles? You got the Marlins, obvious stuff going on. The Orioles isn't quite as obvious to just a random fan because – to me, the way they butchered the Machado deal is bad. They didn't trade Britton even at the last deadline, and now he's hurt, so now you can't trade Brock. That's just a disaster to me. What do you think was the worst offseason?
Well, it's clearly the Marlins. I don't think it's close. I'd be surprised if anyone actually thinks that the Orioles is worse. But the Orioles,
it was 72-28 on the vote, by the way.
Really, that's tough. I wonder how many people are just Baltimore cynics, but
exactly.
It's clearly the Marlins. I don't think there's a debate around it. But the Orioles side is interesting because actually down at the winter meetings, we were actually watching Dan Duquette, the GM, get interviewed by SiriusXM, and then I think we went to go to dinner or something like that, and we were on our phones looking at Twitter and stuff like that. And they broke in that interview that we were watching that Duquette didn't make a pitch or to Ohtani at all. I'm not sure if it was the questionnaire side that he didn't do or anything. He didn't do any of it. He just said, like, we didn't touch Ohtani. So that's, in essence, something that I'm sure riled up that fan base, because you fill out a questionnaire, you have a shot to get an absolute lottery ticket. A guy who's going to put up four wins above replacement and be paid league minimum with a small posting fee that you can easily kind of massage into your budget. But that was something that, I mean, if you're an Orioles fan, I'd almost be most pissed about that. I actually don't mind. I think today I saw some news circulating that it looks like Machado is going to be held that it's cooling off the rumors mill and stuff like that. And they want 2 controllable pitchers long term. That doesn't seem like a thing that most teams are willing to give up. I know the Cardinals are probably in it with Alcantara to some extent, but he went to Miami for Ozuna. So there's very few teams that are probably willing to give up 2 controllable pitchers, and even fewer that would actually do that and then get Machado back. The only 2 that come to mind are like the Dodgers and the Cardinals, but I don't know. I just don't think it'll happen. But I actually don't mind the fact that they're holding on to Machado. I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I think that you can probably fleece a team easier during the deadline when you get them on a sort of a high and they think they're contending, or they think they're Machado away from being a World Series contender, a serious World Series contender, and get them to overpay. And, we've seen this in the past with like the Andrew Miller deal and stuff like that. Like, I know Clint Frazier wasn't an absolute top 10 consensus prospect. He was a very, very good prospect, and one I've liked for a while for various reasons. But that was a lot to give up for Andrew Miller. And like Gleyber was a lot to give up for Chapman. And we've seen a lot of these deadline deals go down where the price coming back to the team with the asset is very high on the prospect side. And to me, you can catch a team. Like, it only is going to take one team. This is something I talked about with Callis, talking about the draft itself in 2018. But he's like, it only takes one team to buy into a guy's power development for them to shoot him up into the first round. And you could kind of apply this logic back to the deadline. It only takes one team to think that they're Machado away from getting to the playoffs and contending for them to overpay for Machado. And even if they don't have the need for that spot, to find a way to put him in, whether it's at shortstop or whether it's at third. And I know the White Sox have been kind of rumored around it longer term. And from what I understand, the rumor is that they'd give up whatever. I'm not really sure what they'd give up, but they would make it contingent upon if they could extend him, because they kind of want him to be the future. And I just am very skeptical, number one, that deal would go down. And it's not because the White Sox don't have the prospects, because they do. It's more the matter of, I don't think Machado's going to sign there long term. Thoughts on Machado as a whole? This is something I kind of has been swirling around my head. I know the Phillies were rumored when I was down in the winter meetings, and I was a little bit skeptical about that, but I haven't really had a team in my mind where I'm like, that's it. I think that he could go there. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I always thought, I think even in one of my previews for last season, that they're close. The White Sox, for one, are close on the rebuild. I wanted them to sign him in 2018 or after the 2018 season. The trading part concerns me, like you said, the prospects. I don't like a team, especially a rebuilding team, to top it off, to be trading for Machado, to give up your prospects without the guarantee you're signing him. You need to lock him in. That is a big, big move, because you've made so much progress and I love what the Phillies rebuild is. I love what the White Sox rebuild is. But what you'll have to give up for him to just watch him walk out the door will be very tough. For the Orioles standpoint, I totally get what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. I never really thought of it that way. I think I saw you tweet it today. So I started thinking about it more, and it made a lot of sense that they could really up the ante come deadline time and get something. And the other reason why the Orioles, and I know everybody wants to run them into the ground, and I've had my fun time with it as well. The one thing they have to remember is they're going to get, I think, 2 draft picks when he leaves and signs somewhere else. And I know they've found ways to screw up a farm system and transactions, but just to give them away for nothing, you got to make sure that returns better than what your 2 early draft picks could be. And that says a lot to what their decision process has to be. At least that's my opinion on it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's an intuitive way to look at it as a whole. But yeah, it's just tough. Like, I'm hard. I have a hard time in my head finding a match. And that's why I think I initially kind of thought that he wasn't going to be shipped. I remember I was talking to my dad, and he said he felt like he was going to trade. I think there was a rumor going around that it was going to be by the end of the week the Machado deal would be done. And I think that kind of got misinterpreted, because it was more of the decision to trade him will be made. It's not whether the deal is done. It's more like, do they want to trade him? Which to me implies that they were probably much further apart on price. Because if I'm the Orioles, like, I'll start this rebuild now. Like, I know they messed up with Britton, but if you get fair value that you as an organization believe is fair value for Manny Machado right now, take that. Like, I don't see any problem with that. And that then comes back to me. Like, I don't think the value was good enough for them. And I think that, as we're saying right here, the value is going to shoot up to near the deadline.
Yeah, they were getting lowballed pretty good on some of these deals. So I don't blame them for what they're doing. It's just like, it seems like a domino effect, and it was out of their control. Like, how did they know Britton was going to go mess his Achilles up in LA while he's training? But it's just been one thing after another for them. It's been pretty brutal. Let's talk Marlins.
Oh, God.
It's an absolute disaster. We know the trades. That's pretty simple stuff. let's just go to the town hall meeting. That was pretty entertaining to me. What was your take on that whole debacle?
I mean, I want to. So I was talking about this with a buddy of mine actually, and we were going back and forth on it. And I think I'm interested in particularly in two aspects of this. The first one I'm most interested in is the question, and we're not going to get an answer, but is Jeter in here just to be a punching bag? Like, I'm sure my philosophy around it, I'll present it. I'm interested to see your thoughts on it. But my philosophy around it is that Jeter may not have wanted to own a major league team as aggressively as we all thought. We understand he's a very, very good individual with the media. He's never had any problems in the past. So if you're Sherman and you're coming in and you want someone, you know you're going to make all these decisions that no one is going to like in South Florida, and you could pull a guy like Derek Jeter onto your side, probably compensate him a little bit more than the 4.5%, excuse me, that he's actually getting equity-wise from what I understand from the team. And just be like, hey, Jeter, this is going to suck. We'll give you ownership. Eventually, we think we might be able to turn around, but we really just need you to be front-facing. Because as much as people hate what they're doing, that town hall meeting, Jeter won the town hall meeting from what I understand, from what I saw. He won it. He absolutely slaughtered it, you know? And it's one of those things like, if you're Sherman, you are a genius right now. You're looking at that and you are popping champagne because that's exactly what you needed. You needed Jeter to go there, sit down and talk the ear of all these fans, 200 fans, whatever the heck was there, off. Because it just seems so logical to me that he gets into this and they literally look him dead in the eye and go, you're going to get slaughtered by the media. Everyone's going to say, you're making these moves. We're not going to give you that much of a decision around this, you know? Like, I honestly don't know how much decision-making power Jeter has. And I don't think it's a lot. Like, I think that people are definitely overblowing it because it's much easier to get clicks with an article. Like, going back to the Athletic and the cost per click model, it's much easier explanation, or any site, I don't mean to throw explanation on the bus, put up an article that says Jeter trades Stanton Ozuna, you know? Yeah. Like, Jeter's probably not the one making a decision. He's there just getting slaughtered because he's
definitely not making the final decision.
I don't think so at all. But do you believe that, or do you think that Jeter has more say than I think he does? Because I think it's very minimal.
It's a weird. I pretty much agree with everything you're saying. It's weird to have, like, obviously Jeter's a great face to have for a franchise, and I get that. But the face to have for a franchise, when you, like, I told many people coming into this, it didn't matter who was buying the team, an implosion was going to happen. That was just the facts.
Yeah.
The Stanton deal, you could not afford it. When they signed that deal, this day was coming, and it was just a domino effect. They're going to have to just gut it and start over. There was no way around that. It's just maybe it could have been handled a little differently. Maybe let the guys know a little more, like Realmuto and Yelich and so on and so forth. That's the story we have no control over. The Jeter thing, which is funny, you know, maybe when they get better in 5, 6, 7 years, if he's still around, he's the perfect face for the franchise. But for a guy that lived his whole life with the Yankees and was the man about giving you the smallest answers with nothing behind them, and now he has to go in front of the media and say he has to answer all these big questions and basically stop the pitchfork mob that's coming at you.
Yeah.
Probably not the guy you want sitting there. You're almost better off with Kenny Williams making a fool out of himself in front of this than Derek Jeter. And I agree. I don't think he's making – I think he has a big impact because obviously they're going to ask, like, hey, what do you think about this, so on and so forth. But pulling the trigger, I don't think he's there. I think he might help, hand him the bullet. He ain't pulling the trigger.
I'd love to see, like, if in 20, 25 years, when Jeter's removed from this and he writes a book or something like that. Like, this used to be a thing. Me and my dad used to always say this all the time. It's like we go back and we're like, what happened with certain player? We can't wait to read his book in 30 years. Like Albert Pujols, actually one. I grew up a Cardinals fan. I am a Cardinals fan. I'm an East Coast Cardinals fan. So anyone that hates the Cardinals, I apologize. Or anyone in the Midwest that is a little bit more aggressive towards the Cardinals as a whole, I understand. I get chastised everywhere for it, but I'm a devout Cardinals fan. But when Pujols left, I was very mad. Obviously, any Cardinal fan that was young and my age would be because I loved him so much. But I always feel like there was something there that happened, and I want to know what happened. But that's not going to come out until Pujols is well removed from baseball. I'd love to know if Jeter, in 20 years we look out and he writes a book and he's like, yeah, we went to those meetings and I said I want more than Alcantara for Ozuna and I want more than Guzman. I like X player better. I want the developed Justice Sheffield or something like that a little further along that maybe we could just sit and develop for a little bit, be competitive in 2 to 3 years. And they just said no to me. Like, would anyone be shocked? I wouldn't be shocked if that happened.
No.
I just don't think he has that much power.
I agree because Jeter, what he could be very good at in this spot is player, not development, but player analysis, like looking at the talent levels. And like you said, Justice Sheffield, he's closer. We can use him soon. But maybe the other guys in the war room are going, well, I'd rather get 3 players instead of 1.
Yeah.
So we can build the whole farm system instead of like go right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then the other side, I'm interested on this. If I could remember it, I'm blanking right now actually. Marlins. What were we talking about? Oh, Marlins. Did you see the Dan Le Batard interview with Manfred?
I heard about it. I have not seen it yet.
It's kind of wild. It's basically Dan Le Batard on his show. He has a morning radio show on ESPN or ESPN2, I think. And he brings Manfred on. And he basically takes – my impression of it was that he took the position that every Marlins fan had, which is just mad about not putting a product on the field. And he went after Manfred. Like, just really targeted questions. Manfred, I actually thought, did a really good job. I actually think it was on Manfred's side, which is really odd. Which, I mean, like, maybe I don't have all the information in the world, but Le Batard just ripped into him. And I just was like, the thing is, like, I don't want to say this. I know it's going to be a little bit, it's not good to say, but I'm interested in, like, where did all these Marlins fans come from that are now mad about the Marlins? And Manfred mentions this, like, I'm sorry if anyone's listening who's a Marlins fan. Like, if you're a devout Marlins fan, I understand. Like, Marlins, if you're a fan, you're from Florida, whatever, you like the team. But there was a championship not too long ago, and now, like, Le Batard seems like, to me, it seems like he's a Cubs fan to some extent, which has, in my opinion, a much more passionate fan base than the Marlins do. It's almost like they had all these assets and were the Cubs, and then Theo came in and stripped everything down and got nothing back and sat there and was like, this is what it's going to be for the next 5 years. Then I could see the justification around, like, Le Batard kind of flipping out. But he just takes this stance. Like, I understand he's backing everyone in Miami. He's definitely from there, so it makes sense that he's going behind that, pushing that agenda. But it just seems so targeted. It seems so almost artificial to me. I was just like, I get it that the Marlins stripped down, but, like, I don't know where these Marlins fans were this whole time. Like, I've seen a lot of them that are just like, man, like, what are you doing down there? This and that. And it's, I put a poll up on Twitter. We're talking about Twitter polls. I put one up. Marlins last year were, I think, 19,000 around for total home attendance on average. And the Rays were at about 15,000, which I think were the bottom 2 in baseball. My thinking, I put a poll out and I was wondering, can the Marlins attendance actually drop by 25% down to 15,000 and have the Rays jump up and Marlins be the last? And I think that the Rays, or actually, no, I think the Marlins were relatively, I think it was like 60-40. People were thinking that the Marlins would have more, which makes me think, like, all right, so Jeter does all this. He gets all this flack on the media, or I'm subscribing to this. I don't mean Jeter. I mean their organization does all this. He gets all this flack on whatever sites you want to say, and then comes back and looks at everything and just goes, yeah, like, the change in attendance isn't as big as we probably initially thought. We're down to like 18,000. And that's the thing to me. It's like, if they only lose 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 people per game at home, like, if you're looking long term with this, the revenue's not going to stay stable. It's probably going to dip a little bit, but long term, I almost want to say they're doing the right thing for the organization, but I know that's such a insane belief to have. But I really want to see those early attendance numbers. I think that's the ultimate what I want to say.
No, that's an outstanding angle to it, because I never even thought of that. But really, again, no disrespect, where do these fans come from? Like, they built a brand new ballpark a couple of years ago, and it was still bottom. You could probably count. Like, you could probably count was it 2 years now? It's been there. You could probably count the total sellouts on. I'll give 2 hands.
Yeah,
it might be one. That's crazy to think about.
And, like, I get the Le Batard's position and stuff, but it seemed artificial to me to some extent. Like, maybe it's a cultural thing. Like, maybe he was just really invested in the city of Miami and therefore wanted to see anything in Miami succeed. But does that then target back to the baseball team? And, like, the other thing too, looking at the national standpoint of the health of the game itself, is it a net gain if we move Giancarlo Stanton to the biggest market in New York and put him on that team? In my opinion, it's a net gain.
It's a tremendous.
If you're talking about the interest level in baseball, like, you could put Yu Darvish on the Marlins, and then put Jake Arrieta on the Marlins. Say nothing happened, they kept Stanton, they kept Ozuna, they add Jake Arrieta, and they add Yu Darvish. Do the Marlins become a watchable team, one that people really want to watch?
No.
I think maybe a little bit more, but it's not like a team like the Angels now, I'm going to watch a ton of West Coast baseball because of the Angels with Ohtani and Trout and Cozart and Kinsler and all those guys. But then I think it's a net gain. You move Stanton there to New York for the game itself, looking at the aggregate macro level, it's a gain to me if you bring Stanton into New York. Like the storylines around the Yankees Red Sox now are so marketable. It's just, it's unbelievable. Like that is a net gain to me. And I know it's being very insensitive to everyone in Miami, but that's the perspective I'm coming at with it. And I know it's harsh, but that's what it is. Like, I don't know. I get the competitive imbalance, but man, I'm excited for the season.
Well, deep down, yeah, I'm pumped for it too. Everyone's saying like the off season's been slow, but I'm loving everything about it. Yeah. But I agree with that. Like really, the net gains are tremendous. You look at what the Yankees and Angels and Dodgers are even doing quietly. Like sure, they might be setting up super teams or something, but as a whole, it's better for baseball. And again, no offense to other teams, but if you want to have more of an impact on a smaller market, show up and support your team.
Yeah,
it's very simple. It's really not that complicated to me. But we'll get off of this because I think it's a great topic. I am okay with what the Marlins are doing because I think it's necessary. I want to judge this when it's all said and done. I want to see all of the parts they accumulated. I want to see the total package. And really, we've seen them do this twice, and they've won 2 World Series.
Yeah.
So let's just wait and see what happens because in the long run, we've kind of beat around it together. Jeter is very smart when it comes to baseball stuff.
Absolutely.
If they just let him do a little bit of work with this, I have confidence 4, 5, 6 years, they will put a competitive piece on the field. I have no problem with that at all.
I'm interested. Yeah, I think that what they've gotten back has been very raw. I'm not too confident in Guzman and Alcantara, but me and Ralph were talking about this on the Razzball Prospect podcast. Like, for Alcantara, this is an absolute best case scenario because he's a guy who, in the Cardinals rotation, in the Cardinals bullpen, because he wasn't going to be in the rotation. It's a matter of there was too much depth there and he was too raw. He goes to Miami. They have all the incentive in the world to make that kid a starting pitcher. And I know he has the stuff to be a starting pitcher. I've seen him in spring training. I've seen him a lot. He has the stuff. It's just the Cardinals don't have the leash to give a guy like that multiple starts, a lot of time in Memphis, and then bring him up, stretch him out through the pen, and turn him into like a Luke Weaver, Jack Flaherty kind of guy. Marlins have all the time in the world now. Put Alcantara as your 5, give him 24 starts a year for 3 years. Like, that's the absolute best case scenario for a guy like that who's trying to figure out the rest of his repertoire. So that's what I like. I know Alcantara wasn't a great return for Ozuna, whatever. He's controllable, he's cheap for the next couple of years, but man, like that's the best case scenario. I find Alcantara, regardless of geography and stuff, maybe he likes St. Louis, but situationally it's fantastic for him.
Oh, no doubt about it. All right, let's talk about the good part of the offseason. We already said Yankees and Angels. Let's talk about them. The Yankees, my goodness, Brian Cashman just gave him the award now, Best GM award. He's been amazing this offseason, even just moving money trades and everything. And then the Angels, you already said you're going to watch more West Coast baseball. I am a diehard Giants fan, and I've already told my co-host on Around the Bases, Mo, that I'm going to be in Oakland on opening day when the Angels are in town instead of San Francisco. So it's going to be amazing watching this whole deal. What's your take on the two teams in their off seasons?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me was actually I found out about that Stanton trade on, I think it happened on a Saturday or a Friday. I woke up and I had a buddy text me who's a Yankee fan and was like, "Yo, they got Stanton," and I was like, "No way," because I went to bed and it was one of those things. I had teams in my mind that I thought he was going to. I thought he was going to the Giants. Actually, I wrote a column on it that I just seemed like it was aligning to me, and it was.
I was hoping that too.
Yeah, as a Giants fan, I'm sure. But one of those things, to me, it seemed like this was a really, really quick, maybe 2-3 calls between the GMs, a couple texts that got done. Because I don't really know. Like, I obviously don't have the insight into the GMs and what they do, but it just seemed so quick to me. It seemed like it was the Cardinals and it was the Giants. The offers were on the table. It was one of those two teams. Stanton rejects them both, and they throw up their hands, the Marlins, and turn and just go, who wants them? And, the Yankees, knowing that Stan had them on his list of teams he'd be willing to go to, turned around and were like, we'll give you 100-mile Guzman and some other kind of junk. And they were like, sure, you can take all the contract? And they're like, yeah, we'll take like 90% of it. And it was it. Like, I literally think it was like one of those snap decisions. And to me, it's just like, again, Cashman stumbles into this. Like, he stumbled into it with reliever markets, too. Like, there was a small peak in reliever value where he got stupid value for relievers. He literally rebuilt that farm system because he ended up at the absolute peak of reliever value. And he sold, which was the smartest thing he could have done. And he got Gleyber, he got Clint Frazier. Yep. And it was just ingenious. It's absolutely ingenious to me that he again now stumbles into this and ends up with Stan. It's just, I don't know. Like, I'm impressed. Like, I'm sure that it's something on his end as well. It's a luck and opportunity. But, man, I don't know what to say about the Yankees. I know you actually I wanted to talk about that over-under here. We could jump down to that if you want. We had an over-under, or I set one at least. So, Judge, Stan, and Sanchez on that team. I was looking at Fangraph. Fangraph Steamer has Judge at 37 home runs, which I thought was low. Stan at 55, Sanchez at 30, which is like 122 total. That's a lot of home runs. And I don't know if I go over under on that. I'm just going to take the under because I just think that there's a good chance one of them misses 20 games for something, especially with the 10 DL. But
that's safe.
Jesus. Like, when was the last time we were looking at 3 players in the lineup and going, can they hit 120?
That's more than the Giants hit as a team last year.
Oh my God, that is terrible.
That is just no. It is. Trust me, I've learned to accept it. I've accepted it. Yeah. There's a reason I was excited about Evan Longoria, and people were like, "Why?" Just trust me, I'm excited about it. But yeah, wow, over under 120. Yeah, you got to take the under just because you imagine there's going to be injuries, like you said, and it's not even. I'm not a fan of this whole they're injury prone thing, but.
Yeah.
Let's just be real. Let's just be real about it. You have a catcher who's going to play 150 games if he's lucky.
Yeah, if he's really.
You got Stanton and Judge, 2 behemoth of individuals, where they're just so big. They're so much more likely to get hit with something or run into something or get hurt somehow. It's just common sense. Yeah. So I could definitely get behind that. Back to the Yankees though, it's wild. I loved it when they did the Gleyber Torres for Chapman deal. You mentioned Miller for Frazier. They bring Chapman back, genius.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of the season last year, they make a trade for Tommy Kahnle and David Robertson, just outstanding stuff. So their bullpen's even better than when it started, like you're saying. And then just little trades, like let's just dump all of Chase Headley onto San Diego. Let's just get rid of all of that. Like, did you promise Epler like a suite at Yankee Stadium anytime he wanted to come to town or something? Because my good, like just the little things he does are just genius. And the scary part is he's not done yet. Ellsbury's going somewhere, and I heard today there's rumors of the Giants, which terrifies me.
Oh God!
But I get it. One reason why why I'm okay with the Giants thing is because the Longoria move was one of the first smart moves I've seen this regime do in a long time. It wasn't just upgrading an offense; it was also financially smart, and that's something they haven't done much of in a long time.
Yeah.
So, because they're obviously not going to contend right now with the big boys, but to get back to that level, they're going to have to start being a lot smarter with their transactions instead of just throwing stuff at the wall.
Yeah.
That's why I like this move a lot.
I agree.
But so that's why the Ellsbury, I'd have to see how it all spun out, because it is strictly a smart business move. That's what it would turn into.
Yeah.
It's just how it work.
I mean, you look at going back to the Giants, just touch on quickly if you want. Like, I was looking at them a little bit, and I mean, I'm sure you know a ton more about them, obviously being a fan, but a lot of bad things happened last year. And, you look at a lot of the projections now depth chart wise, and you see them at about, I think I've seen them around probably 79 wins as is without Longoria. So that's not too far away. Like, you look at general standard deviation of wins, 5 in each direction, 2 standard deviations is 10 in each direction. Like, they could stumble into an 89 win season, and I'm not going to be stunned. Like, look at the Twins last year. Like, you look at that. This is something Eno put up in, I think, a chat the other day. True value of the Twins coming into 2017. Like, in my opinion, that's not a 500 ball club. No. And then they end up getting in the playoffs and playing the wild card game. They lose, whatever. But that's one of those things. You build some hope for a town like Minnesota, who hasn't really been relevant in baseball for a while. He's been knocked around. And it's the same thing with the Giants. I think that they're coming back. And with the vengeance, then you get Cueto to be a pseudo ace, even a viable 3, I think would be huge. And it's you add Longoria, it's just I've never heard a bad thing about Evan Longoria in my life. He's gonna love that area. The fans are gonna love him down there. And I know he's not Longoria of the old, but he's a good player. It's not his power might decrease a little bit. AT&T's huge, whatever. But I mean, I think it's a good move. I don't know.
The 2 things here, which surprised the snot out of me, is the Longo. Here's another thing that makes it appealing. Nick Hundley, who they just re-signed, had 4 home runs in AT&T Park. He was the only right-handed hitter with 4 or more home runs.
Oh, God.
in that ballpark for the Giants. So there's another thing that tells you how bad things are. So Longo's already an upgrade there.
Yeah.
But it was on MLB Tonight last night. They did an overlay of Tampa Bay and AT&T Park. There was only 6 home runs that would not have left the park in AT&T. In Longo's last 3 seasons, or all of his Tampa Bay home runs or something. Because literally, I was shocked when they laid it out there. It's just a portion of Triples Alley that is different than the dimensions of Tropicana.
Yeah, and everyone just thinks that all balls just are magnetized to go to Triples Alley to some extent. And you get the breeze off
and a lot
lefties, but I mean, I don't know.
A lot of it is at night. It gets extra. The air gets thick, and I get that. But I could talk. I'm having fun talking baseball. Let's just put it that way. But let's get to the Angels real quick. We got Trout, who's amazing, and he just got married, and he's living the dream. Just what an amazing man he is. Just has to tweet out pictures of his wife. Thank you, Mike Trout. Like your life wasn't already great enough for any baseball fan alive. And then they go and get the prize toy and Shohei Ohtani. I love the Zach Cozart move. Ian Kinsler. These guys, I honestly think, are going to compete with the Astros this year. They're at about another starting pitcher away, I think maybe a bullpen piece, but they are getting really darn close to making it fun. What are your thoughts on the Angels so far this offseason?
I mean, they've won the offseason. I mean, as a whole, they have.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering, because everyone wants to anoint the Yankees as the winner. I agree. I think the Angels won this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't think it's a question. Again, we're going back to like who had the worst offseason. Like the Marlins, it's without a question. It's the Marlins. It's without a question the Angels to me. It's just a personal opinion on how I value players, I think, in return. But like the Ohtani's an absolute lottery ticket, and you're paying nothing for him, and you got him. Like that surplus value is unbelievable as a whole to have him as an asset. It's mind-boggling if you look at the numbers for it, and that's why they won purely almost on that move. I think that you can consider them. I probably would have considered them the winner purely on that move. Like, don't even factor in Kinsler and Cozart. Like, when you factor them in, it just blows it out of the water for me. But, yeah, you're talking about the pitching side of it. I think they're about a pitcher away, too. I'd be really interested to see. I know Ohtani, there's been rumors that he wants to be kind of his own guy. But, I mean, make a bid for Darvish. That'd be relatively interesting. I don't know if it's realistic. But I've heard a lot of stuff like the Houston wants him. But, you know, the logic around Houston wanting them is similar logic to why the Angels might want him. And I don't know their salary situation or whether to be willing to pay. But at the same time, you look at it, they got a lot of young pitchers there that have been injury prone, have had just issues as a whole in getting healthy and throwing a lot of innings. And to some extent, coming into this year, I'm not going to be surprised if you see one of those guys take off, whether it be a guy like Skaggs, whether take off as in be good, not like leave, excuse me. So become better, excel, like turn into not a Severino kind of guy, but like a Severino light, where you see him jump up into top 30 conversation in the league, like a Garrett Richards, get him healthy. You know, Heaney, it's just a ton of guys like Alex Myers on the shelf for a while. I've always liked him a lot, but I know he has back control problems and just body problems as a whole. But
got good stuff.
I don't. They're gonna contend. He's got hella good stuff. He's a crazy extension too. But I think they can contend. Like, I know that they're still not as good as the Astros. Like, I think it's tough to make the argument the Angels are better than the Astros. But I mean, go back to this thing with the standard deviation of wins around a team that's projected to be like 500. Like, are we going to be stunned if the Angels end up with a better record than the Astros? I would say no. Like, would it be surprised? Yeah, but stunned is in that upper echelon of like the Twins making the playoffs. Like, I didn't see that coming. You know, that's stunned to me. But if we look at the end of the year and the Astros are playing in that one-game wild card and the Angels are win the division, win the AL West by a game, I'm not going to be shocked, honestly. I don't think I'll be shocked. And I mean, it'd be super interesting to see if they make like moves in season because they think they could actually contend and make a productive move, pick up a deadline guy or something. I don't know. They got a lot of assets on that team.
Oh, no doubt. And we got to remember, back before last season started, I, for one, I know many others thought the Angels are going to be probably one of the worst teams in all the baseball, if not the American League. And they were a week out from making the wild card. So they're right there. And it's like the old saying goes, as a Giants fan, I know it for sure. You just got to get to the dance. And if you got a couple pieces, you can make magic happen. So their team's talented enough in a small series to be dangerous.
I mean, as a Giants and Cardinals fans, we know this really well, that you can stumble into anything, you know, like the Cardinals have some really funky runs coming out of wild cards and just getting hot and stuff. And it's one of those things like you just got to get there. You're 100% right saying that.
Shohei Ohtani, we know he's got the elbow issue now. They're going to pitch him probably once a week. I think he's going to hit 3, maybe 4 days if they stick to the the plan he had in Japan, where the 2 days prior to his start, he didn't play the field at all. He didn't hit at all. He did his bullpen. He rested a day and he pitched. What do you think they're going to do with Ohtani? Because you got Pujols in the way. I was a big CJ Cron fan, and that kind of is going to move him around. What's the plan do you think they're going to do with Ohtani?
Yeah, I think that they go to what you're saying, that first thought you had. They're going to pitch him once a week and hit him 3 or 4 times a week. Pujols is probably going to become relatively just probably a clubhouse guy to some extent. I know that's a terrible investment for a clubhouse guy, but you kind of have this. That's a sunk cost at this point if I'm Epler and I'm looking at that team. So I'm interested to see. I think that actually I'll bring up. I talked to this guy Will Carroll. If anyone is on
good old
Twitter
Will.
and enjoys, Will, good. There we go. Injury expert. Yeah, he's an unbelievable guy to talk to in person. I've talked to him multiple times, and he's just a blast. Like, he's funny and he's just really intelligent. And we talked about Ohtani a little bit, and he said that he would not be shocked if the Angels were not disappointed in the fact that Ohtani eventually becomes a pure pitcher by midseason. Like, they're not going to be stunned if at some point they look at this and they go, it's not efficient for us to use you as a hitter. We have more assets on the DH side of things that could be relatively as productive as you're being. Maybe the durability aspect comes up into question. He hasn't played extensive amounts in the last 2 years. I don't think from my understanding in the MPB. And I know he's only 23 and he's going to have a lot of stamina, but I liked what Will said in that. They're not going to be stunned if he goes to pure pitcher. But the other thing that's more interesting that Will said that I've kind of been floating on wherever I've gone recently is the fact that I asked him directly if he thinks there is a way for a player to pitch and play like every day, like pitches and then plays the next 4 days. And Will Carroll said, absolutely, it's a workload management thing. And he was thoroughly convinced. And I bought into it because he knows what he's talking about. But he said the biggest problem in it is understanding the workload on the day you're pitching. It's not the hitting day. It's figuring out the pitching side. And you have to convince that player that it's okay to go 4 or 5 innings only throw 65, 70 pitches, which is so hard to do for a lot of the guys that are Bulldogs that you notice, like Scherzer. You see all the GIFs of Scherzer all the time. Oh, yeah. Hilarious GIFs about him trying to stay in games and stuff like that. Like, that's the nature of a pitcher, Oh, yeah. So it's like to get a guy who, number one, is good enough to be two-way and at the major league level do both. You're already looking at an extremely small population. And then to hope that he's in the subset of people who'd be willing to listen to a theory that's, hey, let's throw you once every week. You're going to throw 70 pitches max. We're going to take you out. It doesn't matter where it is. And we will play you in the field. We'll play you at center field if you want the other days. And Will Carroll was thoroughly convinced of this. And I loved the argument he broke down for me. A little bit more in detail than what I'm kind of bringing up. This is the crude argument. But, yeah. I mean, going back to Ohtani with it, it's like there is a way to get him to play every day and pitch. It's a workload thing. And it's if he's willing to not throw 110 pitches in an outing because he wants to get through 8 and he's dominating. It's tough, but you have to change the mindset. We're talking about the athletic. You got to change the mindset before you change the actual result of stuff like this. So, I mean, worst comes to worst, Ohtani becomes a pitcher, and he's going to be a very valuable pitcher. He's got crazy K rate. I don't think the walk rate's going to shoot up as much as people think from the projections we've seen. I know the mounds are a little bit different in the MPB, but as a whole, I don't think he's going to have trouble adapting. I believe in him. I believe in what a lot of the scouts I've heard from have said about him more than I believe in anything from my video watching. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff, because we don't have most extensive video and et cetera, I think to some extent you have to punt to the scouts, and I'm punting to the scouts. The kid's elite.
No, I think that's a great idea. I'm real excited to watch him and curious to see how it all unfolds. And I hope all the reports about the elbow is just typical stuff. I'm hoping everything's accurate here, because the last thing I want to see is him go down after all this hype.
Yeah.
Last question I have for you, and then we'll do fantasy baseball stuff at another date and time.
Oh, okay.
But I have one more question for you here. Yu Darvish, he's the big name right now. There was a leaked joke, or they thought they had it, that he's going to Chicago. Maybe he does in 2 weeks, and it makes everybody else look stupid, or I don't know. I want him to go back to Texas. Where do you think he goes?
It's tough. This is something I haven't probably thought about as much as I should have. But, yeah, I did see that tweet today. The funniest thing was that Darvish quoted the Barstool guy.
Yeah,
I think it was the Barstool guy that broke it. Classic.
Yeah, Barstool Carl, and he does pretty good stuff too, which is odd.
Yeah, he just decided to tweet that. And Darvish quoted it and said fake news, which I thought was fantastic. I think I retweeted that. But as far as where he goes, I think it's a little pipe dreaming to think he goes to the Astros. That would make that team, I think, substantially better than the Angels, more so than just better, in my opinion. I think that's a big move because they could play around that pen a ton. And if you look at the layout of that pen with Verlander, with McCullers, And I'm just talking about the rotation, but the Penn 2, Will Harris, you got a ton of guys there that are really good. Davinsky still, I think, is still a very elite pitcher, even though he didn't smooth out as I think many of us hoped from earlier in this last season. But I don't think he goes to Houston. I think that there's a very good chance he goes back to Texas. I would say that that's my leader right now, that he goes back. I wish I had more information on what Texas is thinking. I think that to some extent the Fister move was a hedge against it, a smart hedge by them, very quick hedge. It was one of the first signings. They got him for dirt cheap. Everyone immediately called that a great signing, and it's because they moved quickly, and it was probably a good situation for Fister. And it was ingenious, I think, by them. That's probably one of the most underrated moves of the offseason for me, just on a cost standpoint and value standpoint. So I think that was a hedge against Darvish not coming back, but I still think they have a very good shot to bring him back because the core of that team is still relatively there. They don't have the strongest minor league system. They have Mendez and a couple other guys, but Willie Calhoun the projections around Willie Calhoun, which was something I was going to get on the fantasy side, are just blowing my mind. Like his slash is like 270 or something like that with 27 home runs they're predicting him for. Like when was the last time we saw any system give a rookie a benefit of the doubt? Like they love his approach. That team is going to be probably a little better than people think. I think the AL West is going to be a really interesting division, especially with the A's aren't terrible. Like that's the other thing is
they're not. That's the funny thing.
Team. They got pitching. They got Trinan. They got Chris Davis. Piscotty is a Cardinal. I know he had a terrible year. He's still going to get on base he's going to get on base at like a 350, 360 clip. Like that is value. He's going to be like a 2-3 win player, and he's cost effective. It's just like Billy Beane is doing a good job. I don't know if they're going to contend, but to count them out early on is I think a terrible idea. And I'd be very interested to see when they come out with some over-unders what their win total is. If you jump on that A's one early over, like if it's low, I support that entirely. It's probably something I might be doing. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll agree with you. I'll go back to Texas with Darvish.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot for him. As he tweeted out, I heard they were doing it, and he put a picture out a little while ago that he had dinner with John Daniels last night. It was just friends, and that was the reports coming out, and that says a lot about how much he appreciated his time in Texas. So I think that's the logical spot for me. I just don't see him fitting in Chicago. He might still go there. I just don't see it. Houston would be fun. I'd like to see how him and Gurriel bury that hatchet.
I know.
That'll be really interesting.
I don't know if we just don't want to unearth it again, but yeah.
Because that hatchet, you can always say, sure, we're cool, but having to share a locker room is a whole other story.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious to see how, because, if he goes to Houston, man, that brings them from being, just above everybody else to back way up above everybody else. That's a humongous.
Got 4 of the top 30 pitchers in baseball, 25 pitchers in baseball.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Baseball, honestly,
terrifying stuff.
McCullers is the base there, but yeah,
and I love McCullers. He just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, the curveball usage is just insane with him. It's always been an issue. I love him too, but I actually really like. There was a video a while ago of him talking about the curve and how he modifies it every time he throws it and stuff. But yeah, it's so effective. It's just he's fun to watch. Like when he's on, he's one of the most entertaining pitchers I think to watch. Just because that pitch is so good, it's coming, you still can't hit it.
Yeah, his run in the World Series was just awesome, just filth.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
But all right, Lance, I will let you get on your way. This was a blast, my friend. Lots of good talk. We'll have to definitely do this again. We'll do some fantasy talk. We'll just talk whatever because that was fun. And everybody check him out on Twitter at Lance Brozdow. Big3sports.com. He mentioned he's working all over the place. He's grinding it out. He has 2 more podcasts he's recording tonight. Yeah. Busy man, so get him where you can. But Lance, appreciate it, man.
Absolutely, no problem at all. I'm excited to do some fantasy talk with you.
Yeah, we'll definitely get it in. And are you going to be in the Invitational?
Fantrax?
Yes.
Yeah, I put my app in. I don't know how it works. I know the guys over there, so they better effing let me in.
Yeah, you have it in over there, and the guy running the deal. I play in the Barf League with him, so if either one of us don't get in, just
is it Mason?
Yeah, it's Mason. So
yeah, Mason's the man.
Yeah, Mason's the man. So if there's an issue, I might have to call him up and see what's going on here.
Do you know if actually this is a little off? This is more like a personal conversation here, but do you know if there's how the structure of it is?
I have no clue yet.
Because I saw that they have 85 applicants. I know it's not just one 15-teamer, but I'm interested to see if it's 3 15-teamers and then they aggregate all the points, or
I think it's going to be
tiers. I'm not sure.
I think it's going to be like the NFBC does it, where you have your own individual league that you can win.
Smart.
And then you have the overall deal. So I think he incorporated this so, guys like you and I that don't get invited to Tout Wars or other things like that, we can still play because as we started out this whole thing talking is all of these guys, no matter how big or small they are in the industry, they all want to do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
So
the biggest thing. It's got to differentiate, man. That's what I was talking about with the Athletic.
That's why I think this is tremendous. But we will definitely talk fantasy sports, my friend, and we will talk more baseball and whatever else. But again, thanks for joining me. This was Benched with Bubba, episode 61. Catch you guys next time.